Welcome to Riverdale After Dark, a podcast about the CW's Riverdale that, hoo boy, we're stuck in the 1950s. I'm Alex.
Help. If this is the last season, will I ever escape the dark? I'm starting to worry. I'm Justin.
And we are going to be talking all about the absolutely wild, almost 2-minute long, I think, Riverdale Season 7 trailer that just dropped today. Now, you might notice Pete, our third co-host, is not here today. That's because he saw this trailer and died. Pete is dead. That's too bad, but it was so mind-blowing. He couldn't handle it. To be honest, he probably saw the entire lack of Bughead and completely doped out, but we won't get too much into that.
The year is 1955.
All of us, we were all sent back in time. We need to get back 67 years ago, but in the future.
The future.
None of them remember our lives from before we became teenagers again.
Jughead, we're juniors in high school. Life's good. Why would we want to go back?
Things are different here in Riverdale.
I want Kevin to want me.
Yes, I am that Veronica Lodge.
She's a celebrity from Hollywood.
Wait a minute, you and Cheryl are getting married?
Come along, Archie.
Say no more.
Mrs. Andrews.
We need to get the hell out of 1955.
We are not from the future.
Kevin, it's time to start cramming.
Lustful sex, did you say?
Is that like an orgy?
These sorts of things don't happen in Riverdale.
Stop! Something terrible has happened.
Trust me, nothing is ever gonna be the same again.
Awesome. I mean, swell.
Here's what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about general impressions because this is definitely not what I was expecting, though I should have been expecting it, I guess. And then we'll go beat by beat through some of the bigger moments in the trailer as we break them down. So, Justin, why don't you take it away? What were your general impressions of this?
I loved it. Like, this trailer does so much. It opens the door for truly anything goes in this season in a really smart way. Because I feel like leaving last season where we were, and it felt like, oh, how are we going to deal with the whole Riverdale gang being stuck in the 50s? And actually, I think this trailer proves the opposite is happening. The whole world is opening up. Any ship can happen. We're dealing with everyone's personal characteristics, their choices in a very basic way. I think this season's going to be boiling it down to who everyone is at their core. Jughead is the only one who knows what the fuck is happening. So that's a hell of a place to start. I could monologue forever, but like truly, I think my full takeaway is like this opens a door to anything.
There were two big reactions that I had from here. One is over the months since we've known that they're going to be stuck in the 1950s, and we've seen them filming. They're going at least through mid-season. They're still in the 1950s. I don't know if there's going to be a time jump of some sort after that, but they're definitely still there, at least probably through like episode 10, 11, something like that. So we're going to be in here for a while. So a lot of fans have been talking about, and I honestly, I think mentally sort of started to buy into this hype, even though I didn't totally believe it, of like, Oh, we're going back to basic Archie Comics. We're going to have a weird first episode as Tabitha, the guardian angel, comes back and talks to Jughead. And then we're going to be all past that. It's going to be all sock hops and fun. So, no, of course not. Of course Riverdale isn't going to do that. Riverdale is going to go batshit insane in the final season, throw everything at the wall. 100 things you couldn't expect, and then 100 things beyond that. Of course, that's what they're going to do. So that's the first thing. The second reaction is as I saw a lot of other people online, had a very visceral reaction to a lot of the stuff in the trailer. Particularly, I'm sure we'll talk about all the couple stuff. You may suspect that there's one particular couple thing that I took exception to, perhaps.
Yes, you mad, dog.
I'm mad online. But here's the thing. The point of a trailer is to get a reaction from you and get you talking about that thing. That's literally the only thing it's there for. Certainly, it's supposed to give you a sense of the season, an idea of the season. But my suspicion is they're probably only working off of about 4 episodes here, which is still a lot of stuff. But it's showing you that things are going to happen that you absolutely don't want to happen, that are going to make you mad. Things are going to happen that you do want to happen, that are going to make you excited. You don't know the context yet. You don't know how they're going to happen. We're certainly going to speculate about it a lot here on the podcast. But as a trailer, 100% did its job. So I was very happy about that.
Yes, of course. And like I've said, this is a great trailer, but this could also be the first 1 minute and 51 seconds of the actual season, because Riverdale moves fast. And what I love about this is this moves the sort of lines, the areas we always talk about, to the furthest away from where they were. You've got Betty and Kevin together. You've got Archie and Cheryl together. Jughead, on his own, kissing Veronica. We are in areas we haven't touched, and I love that because it's controversial. It's going to make people like Alex scream quietly into their pillows for the next month. But what it also does is it gives us a great starting point where they can move in so many directions to get us to what Riverdale thinks is the endpoint for all of these ships. And I'm fucking excited for the ride.
Well, okay, I want to throw something out at you, and this is still on a general thing, though I think we're probably going to get into some specifics here. There are so many things happening in this trailer. I think the biggest things that I was surprised about is we knew from Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa talking about it, the first episode is going to deal with the ramifications of last season. Jughead remembers what happened in the modern era. He knows that they're all back in time. We see that in the trailer here where he's telling everybody about it. And Tabitha is going to come as the guardian angel of Riverdale and interact with him in some way. That's sort of all we know about that. But we do know that's going to bring closure to that plot line. And in the second episode, something dark happens that is unexpected that kind of kicks us seemingly into the plot or one of the plots of the season. So we certainly get a sense of a lot of that stuff in the trailer. But my question for you is, how much of this is real and what do we think the structure here is? And what I mean by that is there's stuff where it looks like maybe Ethel uses a buzzsaw and chops up Archie. It looks like maybe Betty dies of a seizure. Are we getting another Riverdale-style anthology thing? Are they dream sequences? What do you think's happening?
I think, because I thought about this a lot, because I thought at first, this is going to be a Riverdale-type thing where we're going to have a lot of things happen here and then we're going to leave them behind. But my deeper thinking on it is that it's going to be more about showing the town with pep, the idealized Riverdale that everyone talks about and has talked about, the town that Jughead has said, a darkness seeped into this perfect place. And what this season's going to show is it was never perfect. Mm-hmm. We're going to show it as what they think is perfect and slowly show that it is not perfect at all. And all of this darkness has always been there.
Yeah.
And that to me is where we're going.
Well, and I think that it comes across pretty clearly in how KJ Apa is playing Archie in this trailer, where he is finally, after 7 seasons, 100% the gee whiz, golly willikers Archie that we know from the classic comics. And I think what we're going to get, because he's the way they think about him in the show, he is the avatar for the town in a certain way, or the idealized version of the town at the very least, is is he going to be chipped away at by these dark things that are creeping around the edges, by these real things that are happening as well? We see, like, Kevin is very clearly closeted here and is in love with newcomer who is named Clay Walker, I think it is, probably. And Cheryl is clearly burning a torch for Toni, regardless of what's going on with Archie. So we're going to have that stuff bubbling below the surface. Just to wrap up, and then I'll turn it over to you. I think Archie is the one that this is going to be a lot focused on. You know, I think he is going to be the one, if you're correct about is that darkness creeping in, he's the one that will get worn down or will lift them up eventually.
Well, and I like that, because if Jughead is going to be sort of the one who knows, the like straight man, as it were, who like is aware of everything, then it's going to be Archie's the barometer that we're going to slowly see brought to the reality that Jughead already knows. And I like that. I think that's a really great way to bring the themes of the entire show together, where it's about in the first couple seasons, it was about like showing Archie for what he was and showing the seething underbelly that was ready to be exposed over the course of the show. And in this, it's the flip. It's like he is pure, and he's gonna be brought to bear and shown what the reality of the world is. And that's a fun coda, a fun way to sort of show each side of what Archie is for this whole series.
Well, let's talk about the Jughead of it all for a second, because I still am of the suspicion that somewhere in the first episode, Guardian Angel Tabitha is going to make some sort of deal with him to... Clearly, he wants to leave the 1950s, and he's trying to convince everybody to do that. I think he ultimately might be won over by the end of the first episode and be like, you know what? It is better here. Everybody is happier. Look at my friend Archie. And I do think he's going to forget. And my evidence for this is him making out with Veronica, a thing that I don't think he would do if Tabitha is still in the picture.
Well, he's always said, like he wants to be part of that perfect Riverdale, but he's just too aware of what's happening around him and he can't let it go. And so this is his idealized Riverdale at the beginning. And I think, to your point, I think he's going to try to commit to it, but the reality of it and sort of the storyteller that Jughead is, who's always plucking away at either a laptop or, in this case, a weird-ass typewriter that we see here, he can't help but try to tell that secret story of Riverdale.
Well, let me throw out a theory at you to get back to the structure of the whole thing. I agree with you. I don't think they're just going to do Riverdale again, because the show doesn't really repeat itself, at least in terms of plot. That's not what it does. It just barrels on forward. But I do think we might get something like dream sequences and potentially musical dream sequences, because if you think about it, the show does so many musical numbers anyway, right? And everybody's been asking, oh, what musical are you going to do for the final season? They may still have a musical episode, but I almost feel like in the 1950s setting, it makes more sense to almost do like a mini musical every episode, you know, or a musical number that takes you into this dreamland. Just to throw out my evidence for that, I think Betty having the straight up John Waters Hairspray hairstyle, you throw in a musical number from Hairspray, that montage of everybody vociferously making out with each other, I almost felt like that could be to Touch Me from Rocky Horror Picture Show. So you get a lot of stuff in there potentially that people have been asking for all over the seasons without having to do a full on musical episode, because the whole thing's a musical.
Well, I would say that like it feels like rather than having those like really focused musical episodes, it's about this idealized 1950s Riverdale. So the musical numbers will just occur naturally. Like, I don't think it's going to be dream sequences. Potentially, it could just be like what happens. They just burst into song, because it is that if it's Jughead's perception and he's watching this perfect Riverdale, of course they're going to burst into song whenever it feels right. But don't you feel
like if on Riverdale the characters just suddenly burst into song, that would break the reality of the show, don't you think?
What is the reality of the show, kid? Like, what are you even talking about?
I'm kidding. They've done that all the time, even outside of the 1950s. It's fine. It's not that much of a stretch. I want to throw out one other piece of evidence, though, actually, is we tweeted out through the Riverdale After Dark account, what if every episode is a musical episode? And our friends at Imperial Mammoth, who do the music for the show, we interviewed on the podcast, retweeted it. So, I don't know. That's not confirming it, but...
And those guys, we when we talked to them, they were like, yeah, it's a lot of work. We just keep grinding out songs. And I'm like, this is their marathon. Mm-hmm. This is their Olympics, like trying to crush through whatever this final season in. There's going to be so many songs. They're going to throw everything at the board. And I want to say, coming off this trailer, I feel like so much of this is about like defining who these people are. There's so much like sex in this trailer. There's so much like what is that? What is who people have feelings for? Like there's going to be so much definition happening in this season in a way that I'm so excited for.
Well, and I hope so, because what is sex? I haven't been able to find out. If I could finally find out through watching Riverdale, that would be wonderful.
This is my only way to learn about it, and I've learned some things, but not enough.
Yeah, they don't really make a lot of sense, to be honest. But
yeah,
I don't know. Riverdale make sense.
Tear the heart out of the person you like, I guess, is what I've been thinking.
Mm-hmm. Bake them a pie, bake them a sex pie, and then tear their heart out. That's how you have sex.
I love sex pie at a restaurant.
Just to mention about the episodes, I think we talked about this in the previous podcast, but the names of the first 4 episodes, which I do think give us a little bit more indication of the structure and what's happening in this trailer. The first one is Don't Worry, Darling, which... Smart. Then Skip, Hop, and Thump, I think we see a little bit of the sock hop in here, where Fangs Fogarty is this rocker, this swooning rocker who's going to sing at the sock hop.
Elvis-esque.
Yeah, but the more pertinent ones, episode 3 is called Sex Education, and episode 4 is Love and Marriage. And my suspicion is, obviously we're going to have ongoing plots, but I do think this, like, what is sex thing will probably happen in episode 3, and that's where we get all of that stuff. And then episode 4, Love and Marriage, is the one where Cheryl and Archie decide to get married. Probably, if we want to start getting into this thing that, like, makes me cringe.
Bothering you specifically?
Yeah, it makes me, die inside, is I do think it's a Beard thing. Absolutely. Like, Cheryl, I think where Kevin is with Betty and clearly, like, not open about his sexuality, but clearly dealing with it in a different way, where he's pining for Clay. Maybe they're together, maybe they're not. My guess is, in classic Cheryl fashion, she is having these feelings for Toni that she doesn't understand, and she is overcompensating in the opposite direction by being like, I have feelings for Toni. What am I feeling? Oh, you know what? I got to marry Archie. That's what I got to do.
It's a very Cheryl move to commit to something like that, but that's why, let me just say, when you break down those episodes, like, let's not forget, this season it's going to go so hard. They know they're running out of time. The clock is ticking, so everything matters. Every frame, every minute on film is important here, because they know it's their last chance to do all of this stuff. So, not to set the stakes at the most height possible, but I do think that's where we are. So that's why I think that progression of episodes you just named is intense. It's going to move quickly. And that's why I like what you're saying. I like that we're going to get through that, and we're going to get these characters reacting constantly to their situation. And Cheryl's with Archie, I feel like they're going to play that relationship as sort of, there is a little bit of connection there, but you're going to see Cheryl immediately looking out toward Toni. You're going to see Betty trying to make it work with Kevin, just based on the trailer, but Kevin also trying a little bit, but also like looking outward. Like, there's going to be so much shifting perspective in this that is so exciting. It's like all of the shifts happening in every direction at once this season.
Totally. The only thing that I'd add there is seeing Cheryl kissing Archie makes me feel bad. But let's move on.
Yeah, you're mad. You're mad about it.
I'm mad.
But let me say, like, that's what this is about. It's about like the situations people like. You should feel excited about that stress. That's what this show is about, and they will satisfy that stress. I think, as much as you're mad right now. No, I feel like I'm talking to Pete right now. I know you're mad, but you're gonna feel good eventually. I believe
no,
I believe in Shoni.
There is Shoni in the trailers. Very clearly. There's 2 Shoni things here. One, in that sex montage, we do get a very quick shot of Toni and Cheryl about to kiss. And then there's what looks like a dance.
Have you watched that a couple times? Sorry to interrupt. Have you watched that part a couple times? And like maybe more than the Archie?
Have I made an edit that is just that 3-frame shot and no other part of the trailer? Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I have. No, there is the other sequence, though, that looks like there's some sort of dream ballet thing going on with Toni where Cheryl is sitting and watching her. It certainly seems like she has an orgasm at the end of that sequence. So, again, I think that gets back to those repressed feelings, but I do think they're going to come out. And I think this is the only thing that I am sure about in this final season is I do think they're going to end with Shodi. They are going to end up there, but they're going to make you work for it.
I agree. And let me say the repression, I think this trailer is about saying like, hey, gang, we're all going to have to repress some of our wants at the start of this season. But the point is, like sex, the release will eventually be worth it. And I think this show in this season is going to put us through it here in a great, satisfying way. So we just have to be along for the ride. And let me also say, it's a shame Pete's not here. But I also think the way they're positioning it, all ships are on the table. I think the door is open for a lot of possibility. Because, like, of course, Barchi, ride or die. I do think, like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. The journey of this season is going to be something that none of us can predict.
I mean, we're dancing around it. Do you think Bughead is on the table here?
I think Bughead is on the table, and I think they're going to gesture to it in a way that we don't know exactly what it will be. I still believe Barchi is the end game that we're going to get to, but I think anything is possible, and I think that's the genius of what this trailer does and what this reset in the 50s does. Is it puts us completely off kilter, and it puts all the characters in a place where they're like, "Wait, what are we doing?" And Jughead has to tell them. And so, like, anything goes. It's like a season one where this is literally a 1A episode that we're dealing with.
Yeah. And that is very exciting. Why don't we go through some of the plot points, some of the quick scenes in the trailer that we haven't talked about yet. I'll go in order here. So we actually start with this great sock hop thing happening in Pops, and we get to see the jukebox. I love this little touch. I don't know if it's actually in the show, but it's a very fun thing for the trailer where we get to see 3 songs on the jukebox: Rock Around the Clock, Riverdale Final Season, and Great Balls of Fire. And I really hope they perform Riverdale Final Season, the song. Do you think they will?
Oh, yeah, dream. Can't wait to hear the lyrics to that.
Yeah. And then, as we talked about, Jughead is on his typewriter, his old-timey typewriter in Pops, which I thought was a very funny shot, that he's like lugging his typewriter in there. They're in 1955. He tells Archie, Toni, Cheryl, Betty, Kevin, and Veronica that they're trapped back in time, and they're all like, ooh, that seems ridiculous. What are you talking about? We see Tabitha getting off the bus. We know that they specifically designed it because she wasn't there in the show originally. They felt like they needed to figure out a way to get her to come into town. In my opinion, not entirely necessary, but it's okay. They'll make it work. And then Kevin and Betty are together like we've talked about. We hear none of them remember our lives from before. Archie seems great. And then here's another shot that set my alarm bells off. We get a very quick shot here in the trailer of Cheryl in her car, and she has the Mrs. Grundy heart glasses and does the same looking down over the glasses thing, which seems like a very clear shout out to that iconic nausea-inducing shot from the first season where she's scouting out Archie. That worried me as well, I just want to say.
Well, why does that worry you? What worries you about
I don't like equating Cheryl with Grundy, okay? I don't like Grundy. She's a child molester. I'm going to take a hard stance and say I don't like child molesters. I'm sorry.
That's a strong take. No, but what I'm saying is I think that's a shot that to me is an Archie perception shot. And like I could see Cheryl wearing those glasses just as her life choice, but that's about Archie seeing that and seeing like, oh, that's what I'm attracted to. So I don't think it's trying to make a connection between Cheryl and Grundy. I think it's about an Archie viewpoint situation.
I think you're right about that. I'm just on the lookout for all of these things.
But I also get like why they're doing stuff like that, because it's like connecting back to the beginning. It's like when you're ending a show, of course you're going to draw all the connections you can. They're going to eat the whole lunch. They're going to eat everything they put on the table.
Well, that's what I was going to say on the positive sense of it. There may be some other things that I didn't necessarily pick up on. There's at least one other thing. that I don't know if I'd call it an Easter egg, but it kind of is an Easter egg that we'll talk about in a second. But it indicates to me that they're going to have these little Easter eggs for all these previous seasons littered throughout absolutely everything. The show is always good at that, about picking up its detritus and putting it in different places and making references to it and bringing back things you never thought they'd expect. So yes, that's the positive thing about that. We get a quick shot of Betty and Archie doing the twist in, I believe, Betty's bedroom. Cutting to them having a milkshake together.
Like very close. Classic Archie cover style, almost ready to kiss.
Yep. And then we find out they're juniors in high school, so they are, in fact, straight back to the beginning here. Betty is trying to get with Kevin. He doesn't want it. We find out that Fangs Fogarty is going to be playing the dance. Kevin doesn't want Betty. We get shots of him looking over at Clay Walker. And then we meet Veronica. Veronica is a celebrity from Hollywood. Archie is very earnestly excited about it. We've talked about this a little bit on the previous podcast, but what was your sense of Veronica from this trailer?
Well, the fact that she's a celebrity is interesting. It feels like in the comics, Veronica is just rich, like moving to town, basically. So to put the celebrity on it is sort of a bit of a hat on a hat. So I'm intrigued about what that means for her, because she could easily just be moving from New York and be rich.
I do wonder, though, if part of the utility of it, and this is a very calculated way of looking at it, is neither of Veronica's parents are probably going to be on the show this season. So her being a self-sustaining Hollywood starlet who has a lot of money coming out and doing to Riverdale, maybe that's a little easier to logically explain than she's just coming out from New York for no reason.
That's a great point from a utility point of view, but I wonder how they will use her celebrity in the show. Like, will it be something where she is working in some sort of famous way?
I'm going to take a wild stab and say she might sing some songs.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, great take.
Yeah, I'm having some hot takes tonight is what's going on here. Then we see Cheryl and Archie kissing on a snowy bridge. Betty's very surprised, says, "You and Cheryl are getting married." Do you think, based on this trailer, are Betty and Archie kind of together? Are they friends? What's going on there? It seems like Betty's with Kevin, right?
Yes, I think Betty's with Kevin, but and I feel like they're an ongoing relationship that she's struggling to push forward, and Kevin is, as we know, looking elsewhere. So I think that Betty and Archie are friends. We're getting into the more classic relationship they have, girl next door, boy next door. But I think we're going to get some of that Barchie heat very quickly.
And then
I'll be looking for that.
Yeah, you'll be on the hot lookout. Then Say No More, Mrs. Andrews. He's smiling. They're sitting in Pops together. Ugh. Betty doing the hairspray hairdo. And then we start to twist things into darkness about halfway through the trailer. We see what looks like maybe somebody trapped in a box or something like that. I assume that's from the same episode where Ethel is cutting up people with a buzzsaw, perhaps. We see Toni dancing. Then there's a basketball kid. I don't think it was Dilton. I don't want to be, like it was just a guy wearing glasses, but it looked like classic Dilton.
Fair point. That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I think it's a different actor, though, so I don't think it is him. But he's covered in blood, very similarly to how Ethel later in the trailer is covered in blood. Then we get a whole sex montage kicking off with Betty saying she wants to cram for learning about sex. And Veronica, I believe, says, "Lustful sex, did you say?" And then we get the montage, and here's the couples of the montage. We see, I believe, Veronica and Archie, Cheryl and Toni, Kevin and Clay, a shot of a hot male bod, which I think is Archie, maybe. Then Archie.
Fair guess.
Fair guess if it's a shirtless bad. Archie and Cheryl, and she's eating his whole face there in that shot. And then Betty and Archie. And it cuts to Kevin saying, "Is that like an orgy?" So I think that sequence is imagined, honestly. Like, I don't think I don't think they're really doing that. But then we get something that I do think is real, which is Veronica and Jughead clinking milkshakes. Clearly they're making some sort of deal together, and then they kiss. If I want to throw out a theory that contradicts what I said earlier, if Jughead does remember everything, I feel like he might team up with Veronica to figure stuff out. Like, she might be the one person who believes him.
I think that's fair, though I also bet that I don't think we're going to have every episode Jughead being like, guys, I know it's real. I think that's going to be set at a point and then life will continue. So they could be clinking about literally anything. They could be clinking about trying to get Betty in a better place. They could be clinking about him and Tabitha. Like, they could be clinking about just so many things. So
milkshakes.
I don't know how they could just love a great bunch of dairy, getting some vitamin D into their bodies. So I don't know. I don't know if they are a natural team up where she will buy into his fantastical understanding that he knows the future and they don't understand it.
Well, yes. And again, I really do feel pretty strongly that if Jughead keeps remembering, he would still want to be with Tabitha. So I think he probably does forget at some point. We see the Toni dancing, Cheryl watching her scene we talked about before. And then here's the second kind of Easter eggy thing. There's a character that says these sorts of things don't happen in Riverdale, who seems to be Warden Norton from the jail. The one who I believe died playing Griffins and Gargoyles, if I remember correctly. So I don't know, maybe he's the principal of the school. Maybe he's in some other capacity, but it was interesting seeing him back particularly. Then we get a quick shot of Jughead punching Archie. Here's my suspicion about that. I think that's in probably the first episode. And he's probably doing like, oh yeah, why won't you just be the Archie I know, and tries to punch him. And Archie's probably like, gee whiz, Jughead, why'd you do that? And it frustrates Jughead. So I think it's more of like a jokey punch than an actual punch, potentially.
Wow. I think that could be true. I think we are going to have to settle into not conflict for a while on this season, because we're coming pretty cold into the situation, and then conflict will arise. And I think it will be what you talked about earlier, where it's going to be sort of horrifying.
Yeah. Well, speaking of horrifying, then we get what looks like, well, it's Archie tied to a table, looks like Ethel with a buzzsaw coming towards him, Archie screaming, and then she comes out covering in blood and says something terrible has happened. So what do you think? Is this Archie dying once again on the show?
I don't think they're going to do that. That feels like they can't repeat that like careless, let's kill these people and just reset thing. I do think there's a couple of things here. Either it's going to be a homegrown 1950s style horror situation, which is cool and interesting, or the reality of Riverdale or the reality of our world will start to creep into the 1950s version. You have someone like Ethel who seems more sensitive to this incursion of them being thrown into the past, and she will fly off the handle and become a killer.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And considering if they do want to tie everything together, that she and Dilton were two of the people who were stuck in Riverdale and kind of understood everything that's going on, that might be a way of looping that all together.
Well, it's in a way like Jughead could be sort of an infection into this idyllic. We've seen over the course of the series, we've seen a lot of flashes of what idyllic Riverdale is. Mm-hmm. And if we're actually living in that for this, like, I think Jughead being this little scent of what Riverdale actually is, where there is darkness, him being something that expands out into everyone else makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Then we see Betty having a seizure, which we mentioned earlier. And then a very interesting shot, I thought. We get a shot from last season of Cheryl making the comet explode, the thing that ostensibly sent us to the 1950s in the first place. I was very surprised to see that, to throw that shot in there. What do you think's going on?
To take that much ownership of how wild and like X-Men sci-fi fantasy we got to last season, I thought was interesting. And I don't actually know if they're going to make a lot of reference to that or try to like wrap that into the story. I think it was there to be like, hey, remember, we go hard. We go hard on this show. And I think it was to be like, hey, you think that's all cool? Wait till you see what we're about to do. It was almost like a proof of concept that they were throwing out there.
Yeah, I could see that. It's just structurally a strange thing to throw something from the previously on towards the end of something that is the currently on or coming soon. You know, that's not normally how you do it. You would do quick shots of them having superpowers leading up to Cheryl blowing up the comet, Jughead waking up in the 1950s. So I do think it's still going to play it in some way, or alternately, they just need to fill some time in the trailer. So either way.
Well, I don't think it was meant to be like, hey, remember this plot point. I think it was a thematic reminder. And if they do pay it off as a part of the plot, I think it's meant to be like, hey, guys, everything matters here. Mm-hmm. If you think this is the craziest thing we ever did on Riverdale, we own that and we're going to do more. Yeah. So, like, I'm not scared of it. To me, that's not a reminder of something.
I've been screaming.
You seem scared. You seem scared.
Oh, my gosh. Hiding under my bed right now. Hiding under my bed with my pillow that I am screaming in. Doing all of those things at the same time. I can multitask. Then we get Veronica saying, trust me, nothing is ever going to be the same. And following that, I was so excited to see this. I can't believe he's back. My favorite character from Riverdale, finally at the final season, old man blowing out a match. Obviously, we haven't seen him in a good long time. He's still doing the same thing, blowing out a match. What did you think? Were you excited to see old man blowing out a match here?
I wish he could just pay his power bill so he didn't have to be truly committing to candlelight as a thing. I don't know what this means. I don't know if it means anything. I think it's just a cool thing to throw in here.
All right, fair enough. And then
what are the deeper understandings?
No, I don't have any deeper meaning. It was just one of those things that felt very Riverdale to me, where we got to see all these rando characters in the trailer for that in particular. And we were like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? And ultimately it was like, well, that's an old man blowing out a match, but he looks very creepy.
Yeah.
So I think it just means that there's darkness in this world as well, like we've been talking about. And the last thing is a very cute moment with Jughead and Tabitha, where he says, awesome, and then realizes what he's saying and says, I mean, swell. And I assume this is something for the first episode. If he forgets, it probably is before that. Otherwise, if he doesn't forget, I think that indicates that they have decided to pretend and be in the 1950s, potentially. So there's two ways they could go there.
I think it's telling that Jughead is with Tabitha in the final shot here. Like, as much as I say all ships are on the table, I believe in Tabitha, and I think this was an indication that is an important relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, listen, going into this season, just based on the last season, you got Barchi, you got Shoni, you got Tabitha, and then you have this new ship based on the trailer from Kevin and Clay. I don't know what's going on with Fangs necessarily. I guess we'll have to see what happens. And obviously there's like a couple of other ships there.
Where does Veronica land in that rubric?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think the main thing, though, is if this is only based on the first 4 episodes, or even if it's based on the first 5 episodes, or even if they threw in one shot from the 10th episode, this is 1:51 of footage, and that's it. So like you're saying, I think we could see some indications here of potentially where they could go, but we don't really know. We don't know. This is 22 hours in the future. We will eventually find out where this all ends up. Could be anywhere, but right now, I'm very excited.
I'm also very excited, and it's fair to say none of what we've seen is an indication of where we're going to end up. This is all just a starting point.
Yeah, and I do have one prediction that I'm very confident of that I want to throw out there. And this is based... Let me
guess.
What?
Shoni, some Shoni related.
Okay. Actually, 2 of them. One is Shoni as Endgame. The second one is, this is just based on us doing this podcast for the past 6 seasons, plus multiple episodes in between. Everything we said here is going to be wrong.
Yeah, I will say I feel like we'll get one right.
We'll get one right. Win. Yeah,
we'll get one win, and we just got to remember to brag about it eventually. I don't know what it is, but let's remind ourselves to be real cocky about it.
In August, we'll be like, we knew it.
We nailed that.
Old man played out a match. He was the most important character. We knew it all the way back then. And all of you were very excited to go on this ride in this final season with you. It's going to be... I got very excited. Like, I was definitely in this holding pattern. Seeing this trailer, I was like, it's all happening. Here we go. Back to the crazy.
Truly, it opened my eyes back to like, yes, the chaos. The chaos is back, and I love it. I can't wait to try to be like, oh, that's what I see. I see what they're doing now.
Oh, it's going to be great. Very exciting ride. And for all of you out there, if you'd like to support this podcast and the other podcasts we do, patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube and Facebook. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Riverdale, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us at Riverdale Dark on Twitter, Riverdale After on Instagram, Riverdale After Dark on Facebook, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, we'll see you after dark.
After dark and before the end of Riverdale.
Oh, so sad.